The Honda Odyssey is among the most recognizable nameplates in a dwindling class of minivans. It's actually the oldest continuous nameplate among US minivans, having been around these states since the 1995 model year. Now in that span, the Odyssey has survived literally dozens of discontinued or renamed minivans, all of which ended up in the scrap heap of automotive history. Not to worry though, the sliding doors remain wide open for Honda's Contender, which sees a number of updates for the 2021 model year. Let's see if those updates are enough to keep the Odyssey competitive against three key rivals, as well as that always pesky minivan alternative, the three-row SUV. Now, this is the fourth model year for the current generation Odyssey. That's the fifth generation in case you're keeping track. Typically in a vehicle's life cycle, that means it's time for some visual updates. So it goes here. Let's take you through them. So first of all, there used to be a lot of chrome kind of in the middle part of the grille. It's been relocated now to a position above the grille. The lower bumper has been redesigned a little bit. The outboard openings have a little bit more of a vertical theme than before. If you get lower trim levels of the Odyssey, a big difference is going to be LED headlights. Now, those are standard across the board. They used to only be available on the top couple trim levels of this minivan. Around back, you get some visual differences as well. There's a new dark garnish above the rear window, and the chrome between the tail lights has been toned down a bit, a little bit like up front. Inside, the Odyssey gets newly available power lumbar controls for the front passenger seat and second row captain's chairs that now fold flat so they're easier to remove. Now, Honda's Magic Slide feature remains in effect here. That means you can move these seats side to side up to more than 12 inches in most trim levels of the Odyssey minivan. That's really nice because when you scoot them out to be as far apart as possible, we measure about 18 inches of aisle space between the seats. About 3 to 6 inches more than the space we measured between the captain's chairs of competitors like the Toyota Sienna, the Kia Carnival, and the Chrysler Pacifica. Scoot them both off to one side, and you have a nice space here to get back to the third row without having to kind of mess with anything that's already in the second row. Second row flexibility is an enduring innovation, but equally enduring is Honda's refusal to innovate with its front center console. The Odyssey still has the OG floor console, and it is fantastic. I really mean that. I'm not being sarcastic here. Give me a minute. This actually has space for you to throw a large bag, you know, a purse, a diaper bag or something, ahead of the cup holders instead of having to shoehorn it into some covered compartment or under a bridge console. You know, back in the day, most minivans actually used to do this. And then one by one, automakers left minivans for SUVs, and a bunch of the ones that remained thought their interiors needed to become more like SUVs, and so they adopted these flow-through consoles that were perhaps more stylish, but always less utilitarian. I'm really glad Honda stuck with what works. This is a van that's proud to be a van. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now because there's actually a few other things about the Odyssey that are starting to wear thin. We'll take you through them. First off, let's talk about these controls. Now, the largest available touchscreen in the Odyssey only measures 8 inches diagonally, about 28 inches square. That's only about half the size in terms of square inches of something like the Kia Carnival's largest screen. You get the base Odyssey trim level, the LX, and you're stuck with a 5-inch unit. It's tiny, it doesn't have any Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but that's the only way to get a full roster of physical controls. You upgrade to the 8-inch unit, which does have CarPlay and Android Auto, and now you're stuck with Honda's display audio system, which is really a mess to use. It's got a volume knob, but no tuning knob, and it's got all these touch-sensitive buttons up here. Really a mess, kind of just in terms of how intuitive the layout is. Any Odyssey, regardless of trim level, is going to stick you with this push-button gear selector below it. You know, Honda's had this in a number of products. It's equally unintuitive. That selector works a 10-speed automatic transmission with short gearing for quick acceleration from a stop. But if you need more power while already in motion, it habitually bogs down. Multi-gear kickdown at 50 miles per hour can take a full 2 seconds or longer if you're in drive. That's twice as long as we timed in some of the Odyssey's competitors. The driver-selectable S mode shortens shift times considerably, but chances are you're going to be driving in drive most of the time, and there, downshift hesitation is unreasonably bad. There's more of the bad stuff. Ride quality. It's always been a problem for the current generation Odyssey, and back-to-back driving with the competitive set really puts a spotlight on that. Impact harshness and highway isolation are both clearly the worst in this group, with an unnerving degree of body movement during quick changes in elevation or momentum. The suspension is firm, yet the chassis doesn't feel terribly rigid, and that's really a 1-2 gut punch on road trips. Also in the negative column, though it may not matter as much to minivan shoppers, is interior quality. Honda's molded-in dashboard stitching looks obviously fake, and unsightly cheap plastics occupy noticeable sections near the steering wheel and on the doors. The leather in our top-line Elite trim level here still feels a few grades rougher than the stuff you can get in upper trim levels of the Pacifica and the Sienna. Of course, it bears mention that minivans aren't exactly known for upscale interiors. which is all fine and well since your kids are probably going to make a mess of them anyway, but the Odyssey feels especially drab. It's also not particularly roomy, at least in terms of cargo space behind the second and third rows relative to other minivans. Now don't get me wrong, the Odyssey here beats the pants off the cargo space you'll find in any mid-size 3-row SUV around the same price, but versus other minivans, it's a little bit behind, close to 10% under the as-tested volume we found in the rival Carnival. That's not to say the Odyssey is a bad van. The front seats are exceptionally comfortable, and the second and third row passed our evaluation of child seat accommodations with flying colors. Honda deserves a lot of credit for sticking to a tried and true minivan formula of flexible utility. This is unapologetically a van, not something trying to masquerade as an SUV, and the minivan faithful should be rooting for Honda to stay with that formula once the Odyssey is redesigned. But all shoppers are probably going to want that redesign to come sooner rather than later. Make no mistake, the current generation Odyssey is an aging van, and Honda didn't use this mid-cycle update to address a few things that might have been fixable without a full redesign, namely those dashboard controls and the suspension tuning. Now, minivan shoppers are no doubt still gonna want to include the Odyssey in their search, but make sure you kick the tires on all those other vans too. You might find the Odyssey's advantages offset by a few distinct flaws as well.